This is the U.S. History first semester exam. I'm going to be reading this aloud. Feel free to pause me as you answer the questions. And then you can always hit play when you're ready to move on to the next question. The first section is about westward expansion. Number 1, the belief that the U.S. would inevitably expand by God's will westward to the Pacific Ocean and into Mexican territory is popular sovereignty, manifest destiny, emancipation, abolition. Number 2, those who supported blank wanted Native Americans to fit into white culture. Affirmative action, assignation, assimilation, asphyxiation. Which of the following was a reason for westward migration? Escaping religious persecution, spreading the virtues of democracy, claiming new land for farming, ranching, and mining, or all of the above? Next section is pre-Civil War. Number 4, which statement best describes the impact the cotton gin had on the number of slaves? The invention helped decrease the number of slaves in the South because it allowed planting to be done faster. It reduced the number of slaves in America by half because they weren't needed to pull seeds out of cotton. It made America more dependent on slaves because more cotton was planted. Or it caused trade to increase between France and Great Britain. Number 5, after Lincoln won the election of 1860, the South was worried that their blank would be taken away by the federal government. Their trade with China, their states' rights about slavery, their industrial factories, or their treaties with Native Americans. Number 6, in general, this term means a complete doing away with, which is how it came to be the name of the movement to outlaw slavery. Antebellum, abolition, gag rule, emancipation. Number 7, according to the idea of popular sovereignty, which of the following would decide whether slavery would be allowed in a territory? The Senate, the President, the residents of the territory, or the House of Representatives? One of the most active conductors on the Underground Railroad was Harriet Beecher Stowe, Horace Greeley, Harriet Tubman, Clara Burton. Number 9, this Supreme Court decision ruled that slaves did not have rights and the Missouri Compromise was unconstitutional. Is that Minor versus Happersett, Schneck versus United States, McCulloch versus Maryland, or Dred Scott versus Sanford? The next section is about the Civil War. Number 10, when the Civil War began, what was Abraham Lincoln's main goal? To abolish slavery, to punish the South, to restore the Union, or to start an alliance with Great Britain? Where did the Civil War officially begin? Bull Run, Shiloh, Gettysburg, Fort Sumter. Why was the Battle of Gettysburg considered a turning point in the Civil War? It made the South give up the idea of invading the North. It divided the Confederacy at the Mississippi River. It allowed them to capture Jefferson Davis, or it saved the Confederate Army from a humiliating defeat. Number 13, the final surrender of the Confederate Army of Northern Virginia took place here. Ford's Theater, the White House, Capitol Building in Richmond, the Appomattox Courthouse. The war hurt the South economically by leading to the collapse of its waterway system, textile mills, plantation system, cattle business. Grant and Sherman's strategy of total war scorched earth targeted not only the Confederate Army, but also civilians, Northern sympathizers, African Americans, or Native Americans. The next section will be about Reconstruction. Number 16, Abraham Lincoln's approach to Reconstruction could be summarized as an effort to punish the South, to delegate Reconstruction to Congress, to follow the South's plan for Reconstruction, or to make it relatively easy for the South to return to the Union. What did the 14th Amendment do? Forbade slavery, granted citizenship to Black Americans, gave Black men the right to vote, forbade racial discrimination in public places. Number 18, what did the 15th Amendment do? Forbade slavery, granted citizenship to Black Americans, gave all men of age the right to vote, or forbade racial discrimination in public places. And number 19, the 13th Amendment prohibited slavery, granted citizenship to all Americans regardless of race, enfranchised all American men, or prohibited presidents from serving more than 2 full terms. Number 20, which statement best describes African Americans' place in society in the South after Reconstruction? They had all the same opportunities as whites and began prospering as a race. They were treated like second-class citizens and lived under a different set of rules than whites. They were given chances to improve their place in society, but were more comfortable living as they did when they were slaves. Or several began running for political office, and after they won, they made several gains for African Americans. 21. Which term best describes a scalawag? White Southerners who joined the Republican Party for personal gain, freed slaves, former Confederate soldiers, or high-ranking Confederate officials. The next questions will be related to the West. 22. Canals were the popular mode of transportation until the emergence of automobiles, railroads, stagecoaches, airplanes. Which statement best describes the views of Native Americans in the 1800s with regard to land ownership? Land should have proper boundaries like fences. Land should be used only by those who own it unless another arrangement has been made. Land was not designed to be owned by an individual. Land should be administered by a government that controls the use of the land. This massacre of 300 Native Americans in 1890 effectively ended the Indian Wars. Little Bighorn, Pine Ridge, Wounded Knee, Trail of Tears. 25. If you worked the land for 5 years and made improvements to it, you could get 160 acres of land out west for free under the Quota Act, Chinese Exclusion Act, Homestead Act, Ranching Act. The next section will be about business and labor. 26. Identify the person who created trusts and was criticized as a robber baron while serving as head of the Standard Oil Company. Alexander Graham Bell, George M. Pullman, John D. Rockefeller, Thomas Alva Edison. Identify the person who perfected the incandescent light bulb, created an electrical power system, and organized power plants. Alexander Graham Bell, George M. Pullman, John D. Rockefeller, Thomas Alva Edison. Number 28. Identify the definition of a monopoly. A cheap and effective manufacturing process for making steel. Complete control of an industry's production, quality, wages paid, and prices charged. Theory of biological evolution, or an agreement to limit emigration of unskilled workers to the United States. 29. Increasing low wages, reducing a 12-hour workday, and increasing safety in the workplace were all things fought for by John D. Rockefeller, labor unions, scalawags, carpetbaggers. The next set of questions will be about immigration. Number 30. An immigrant who went through Ellis Island was most likely to have come from Asia, Europe, South America, Australia. 31. Through which place did immigrants arriving on the West Coast pass before gaining entry into the United States? Angel Island, Ellis Island, Coney Island, St. Louis. 32. An overcrowded and unsanitary apartment building in the city was known as a slum, a settlement house, a tenement, or a peonage. 33. Many immigrants flocked to the nation's cities because of quality schools, steady jobs, convenient shopping, access to public transportation. 34. People who favored the concept of nativism feared and opposed slavery, abolition, immigration, popular sovereignty. The next set of questions will be related to the Progressive Era. 35. Which of the following was not a problem for those living in urban areas in the late 1800s? A lack of sanitation and clean water, an increase in crime, the spread of fires, the lack of ethnic communities for immigrants arriving in the U.S. 36. The Progressive Movement regarded all of the following as worthy goals except protecting social welfare, promoting business monopolies, creating economic reform, or fostering efficiency in the workplace. Number 37. In the Jungle, Upton Sinclair exposed dangers faced by coal miners, corrupt business practices of the Standard Oil Company, unsanitary conditions in the meatpacking industry, or illegal deals between special interests and the government. 38. The law that required truthful labels was the Pure Food and Drug Act, the Meat Inspection Act, the Sherman Antitrust Act, or the Interstate Commerce Act. 39. Identify the president who supported progressivism through the Square Deal. William H. Taft, Theodore Roosevelt, Woodrow Wilson, William McKinley. Number 40. This legislation put forth strict cleanliness requirements for meatpackers and created the program of federal meat inspection still used today. Sherman Antitrust Act, Pure Food and Drug Act, Meat Inspection Act, or Square Deal. Which statement best describes how the muckrakers affected our government? They raised awareness of issues that prompted the government to take a more active role in passing legislation designed to protect people and keep them safe. They went on strike against businesses in order to cause the government to pay them a better wage. They engaged in war against Spain in order to acquire more land for us to govern, or they ran for office in the South as Republicans in order to prevent segregation laws from being passed. Number 42. Jane Addams established the first settlement house in Chicago and named it Hull House, was the first American woman to be elected to a national political office, was the first woman to earn a professional degree, or was a Native American woman who spoke out for the Ponca people. The last part of the test will be related to World War I. 43. Which of the following countries was not a member of the Allies in World War I? USA, France, Germany, Great Britain, Russia, Serbia. 44. Which of the following was not a major contributor to the start of World War I? Nationalism, alliances, economic depression in Europe, imperialism, militarism. 45. Which of the following events was the spark that led to the countries of Europe and the outbreak of World War I? The Zimmermann Telegram, the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand, the alliance between Serbia and Russia, or the sinking of the Lusitania? 46. The style of fighting is most characteristic of World War I. Search and destroy missions, shock and awe, trench warfare, airplane bombings. 47. Which statement best describes the Zimmermann Note? A letter sent by Germany asking Mexico to join the war in return for helping it get land back from the U.S., General Zimmermann's plan to capture France for Germany, a secret treaty between Russia and Great Britain, or Russia's plan to invade the U.S. 48. All of the following were reasons for the entry of the United States into World War I except one. Which of the following is not a reason for the U.S. entering World War I? The U.S. had strong ties to England in part due to the common language and heritage, the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand by a Serbian nationalist, the sinking of American ships, thus violating our neutrality rights and freedom of the sea by German submarines, the Zimmermann Note, which proposed a German-Mexican alliance against the U.S. 49, which best describes the idea of the 14 points, end World War I peacefully and make future wars less likely, punish Germany for its role in the war, allow those victorious in the war to prosper, allow all nations to act in their best